Alright, we got a 97 Honda Accord here and it's losing coolant. Let's see if we can find out where it's losing it from. And as you can see, we put a light on there. The reservoir is down a little bit and I just topped this reservoir off a couple weeks ago. So we're definitely losing coolant somewhere. One of the best ways to find a coolant leak, flashlight and a visual inspection. Take a look at all the hoses, connections, look for any evidence of leaking, and a lot of times you'll find it that way. Make sure you check, the radiator. These plastic pieces up around the neck will break, and then in this case, I don't know if you can see the blue down there on the AC compressor. Well, that shouldn't be there. And yeah, I think, let me move this fan a little bit. Ah, there we go. That's our problem right there. And look at that. The fan has cut into the radiator and it's leaking pretty good. No fancy test equipment needed on this one. Now, we didn't even need any tools for this one. But for the heck of it, let's put the old Astro 78585 to the test. See what it shows. And I'm just going to use this connector and the pump. And this is nice and cool. I wouldn't open these when they're hot. So we'll pop it open. Put our connection on. We'll just put it up to 15. We'll see how fast it drops. Now, I went ahead and pumped it back up, then I let it sit for about 10-12 minutes or so. And you can see that's about where it's at right now. It only dropped a little bit. And if we look, if I can get a shot in here, and put the light on there. Yeah, if you look, it doesn't look any different. If I put my finger on there, it's a tiny bit of coolant, just a tiny bit. So as you saw in this, our fancy tools and test equipment didn't help us. It was simply visual inspection, and that was the key. In many cases, visual inspection can lead you to the proper diagnosis. And so in this case, we're going to need a new radiator and a new AC condenser fan. So that's what's up next for this vehicle. Quick tip on the radiator fan. This contraption right here is too big to come past the AC lines. So if you're just trying to pull this thing straight out, it's going to hit this, especially with the upper radiator hose in the way. You're not going to be able to get it out. And so if you're not taking the radiator off, you can sneak it past this side over here. You got to take the battery out, the coolant reservoir out like I have, and the battery tray. You take all that stuff out, you can sneak it right through here. You still got to move this a little bit, try not to damage it, but you can get it out that way without disconnecting the coolant system. Obviously, if you're doing what I'm doing, you're disconnecting the coolant system. You just got to put this hose, get this hose out of the way, and then get this lip over here, and then you can maneuver it and sneak it up, and you can get it past the hose right there. This fat part. And get it past the hose, and you can get it out that way, but you have to disconnect the coolant system to do that. So those are the two options to get this big contraption out. The other one right there, it just slides right out. And if you're going to replace the radiator on your vehicle, I would go with a Denso unit. They're the ones that make most of these radiators for these Hondas, and so you're usually getting the same quality as what would come with the Honda name on it. And when it comes to fans, when the vehicle's this old, I'm not going to pay the kind of money that Honda wants for a brand new fan. But I've had decent luck with these TYCs. They're not foolproof, but they're not too bad for the price. Of course, make sure your radiator is the same. Make sure it looks exact before you start putting stuff together. Now in this model, I like to take the transmission cooler lines and connect them all down here. And then where I disconnected them to pull it off, I just disconnect them off the transmission right here. And then it's a good idea to just mark them, or at least one of them, so you know which way they go, so you don't put them on backwards. And then I'll put the bolts for the fans already installed, so that way we can just slide the fans in place. And then, but I leave the fans off, because on this model, it won't fit. So you got to put the fans in afterwards. While I'm thinking of it, there are rubber feet down here, one on each side. Make sure that the legs of this radiator are sitting down inside secure. That way it won't go anywhere. And then usually I'll leave this unbolted so that I got a little bit of play so I can sneak the fans in. Now when I disconnect the automatic transmission cooler lines, I disconnect them up here, it's easier. And then I just pull the whole thing out together. And then when I set them back in place, I do the same thing. I connect all the lines down there, tighten them up, and then I set the radiator in place. And then I'll make my connections here. And then before I put the fans in, I'll tighten these up because it's easier to get to them with the fans out. And if you ever do window regulators, a lot of times you get these 10mm bolts. They work great right here for when idiots forget to put the bolts back or lose them. Alright, when you're done, before you fire it up, make sure all your hoses, clamps, everything are put back. The brackets for the radiator are put back. All the little bolts to your fans are put back. Make sure the fans are plugged in. Don't forget little brackets like this that go back on there. And your transmission lines, don't forget to reconnect them and make sure the hose clamps are all tight. Last thing you want is coolant or automatic transmission fluid spewing everywhere. And of course you're going to need some coolant. I recommend the Honda Type 2, and the best price you can get is by the case. It comes in 6, as you see, and I want to say I paid just over $13 a gallon for this. So if you don't need 6 of them, go in with a buddy or something who owns a Honda and you can save some money. And this is probably one of the most important steps you can do. Bleed the system on these Hondas. Now this one does have it has a bleeder valve on there. I don't mess with them, I just use a spill-free funnel like this. You start messing with those on 20-year-old cars and you can open up cans of worms that you don't want to mess with. Don't forget to turn the heater on too. You need to get the air out of that heater core also. Both the cooling fans are working. We're going to let those come on and off a couple times and get all these air bubbles out, and then she'll be good to go. And we want to keep an eye on our temperature gauge and make sure it's right where it's supposed to be, and it is. And when we don't see any more bubbles and the cooling fans have turned on and off a couple times, then we know we're good. Alright, and just like we started this job, we're going to do a visual inspection, looking for leaks and anything like that. Don't forget, check underneath the vehicle too. And because we disconnected some automatic transmission fluid lines, check your ATF fluid, make sure that the level's okay. Now usually you don't lose enough to make a difference, but it's definitely a good idea to check. And you can see that old fan definitely cut into this radiator pretty good. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the little tips and tricks on finding a coolant leak and fixing it on these Hondas. And as always, if you enjoyed the video or it helped you out, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.